paid freeze for whatever reason. It's a good enough reason. Whatever the reason, it's a good enough reason. Absolutely. We're just going to have a short break, ladies and gents. I'm still here. Going back to a conference of 2014, I think Theresa May was quite phenomenal before Boris Johnson took over the throne.
Thank you very much. Well said, Anthony. Thank you, Alexander, for that thoughtful and inspiring speech. It's difficult for most of us here in this hall to really appreciate the effects of stop and search. You see, most of us are white. Most of us are of a certain age. Well, we're certainly not teenagers anymore. But imagine walking home or driving to work one day and being stopped by the police. Imagine having done nothing wrong. You're patted down, you have your pockets turned inside out, and your possessions examined. Imagine you ask why you're being searched, and you're told it's just routine, even though the police need reasonable grounds for suspicion that you've broken the law. Imagine growing up and the indignity of this happening to you 20, 30, 40, even 50 or 60 times. And imagine what it's like to feel deep down that this is only happening because you're young, male, and black. Properly conducted, stop and search is a legitimate and useful police power. But figures gathered by the police themselves bear out the experiences of young men like Alexander. Only about 10% of stop and search incidents lead to an arrest. If you're black, you're 6 times more likely to be stopped than if you're white. And according to the Inspectorate of Constabulary, as Alexander told us, 27% of stops are carried out without the reasonable grounds for suspicion required by law. That means more than 250,000 stops carried out last year were probably illegal. This is hugely damaging to public confidence in the police. It's a dreadful waste of police time, and it's simply not right that young men like Alexander, who've worked hard, respected the law, and done all the things expected of them by their parents and by society, should be treated this way. And that is why I've always been determined to reform stop and search. Now, under Labour, you remember then the Party of Equality? Stop and search powers were extended and extended. Under the Conservatives, they've been cut back. Under Labour, oversight rules and safeguards were downgraded and discarded. Under the Conservatives, they've been strengthened. And the result is less and better targeted stop and search. At its peak, under Labour, there were 1.5 million stop and search incidents per year across the country. We've reduced that by a third to 1 million last year. The result is less injustice, less anger, and more time for the police to catch real criminals. But I know that the misuse of stop and search is still a real problem. So if those numbers don't keep falling, if stop and search doesn't become more targeted, if the stop to arrest ratios don't improve, we will legislate to make those things happen. Because I am determined to make sure that nobody should ever be stopped and searched because of the colour of their skin. conference, I could easily spend all my time today talking to you about our other achievements in the Home Office. Now, because of European free movement rules, overall immigration is still too high. But where we can control immigration, we are controlling it. And immigration from outside Europe is down to the levels of the 1990s. To deal with Labour's debt crisis, we've cut police spending by more than a fifth, but police reform is working. And under this government, crime is down by 22%. I could go into a lot more detail, but instead, I'm going to talk to you about the deadly terrorist threat we face. David Haines was a tireless humanitarian worker who helped Muslims, not just in Syria, but in Bosnia, South Sudan, and Libya. 2 weeks ago, he was murdered by terrorists simply for being British. His murder followed the equally barbaric killings of James Foley and Stephen Soploff, American journalists who were reporting to the world the plight of the Syrian people. The terrorists who murdered David Haines like to call themselves the Islamic State. But I will tell you the truth. They are not Islamic and they are not a state. Their actions have absolutely no basis in anything written in the Quran. What they believe has no resemblance whatsoever to the beliefs of more than 1 billion Muslims all over the world. And like all the other Islamist terrorist organizations, they have caused the deaths of many thousands of innocent Muslim civilians. They occupy large parts of Syria and Iraq. And not only are they bringing death and destruction to the people of those countries, they have made absolutely clear their desire to attack Britain, America, and the West. ISIL are just one of the terrorist threats we face. There is Boko Haram in Nigeria, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula in Yemen, like-minded groups in Libya, Al-Shabaab in East Africa, terrorist planning in Pakistan and Afghanistan, and homegrown extremists who, like the 7/7 bombers, were radicalized here in Britain. Last year, drummer Lee Rigby was murdered by Islamist extremists in London, while Mohammed Salim, an elderly British Muslim, was murdered by a Ukrainian far-right extremist here in Birmingham. The police and security service are working hard every day to prevent other terrorist attacks on our streets, and we should thank them for the tireless work they do. Dealing with those threats requires a deep understanding of what is going on in the world and a studied, careful response. Because there are no simple answers. We can't go around the world trying to make it in our own image. We can't just remove dictators and assume that liberal democracy will follow. When you look at what is going on across the Middle East, there is a battle raging for the heart and soul of Islam itself. And that battle is very complicated. There is the ancient split between Sunni and Shia Muslims, tribal rivalries and hostilities, autocracies, theocracies, and yes, democracies too. States that fight proxy wars against others in third countries, countries that sponsor insurgent movements and terrorism, whole regions that are a lot beyond the control of their governments, terrorist groups that are more powerful than the states they're based in. A conflict between different interpretations of the true faith, between scriptural literalism and modernity, between tradition and progress, between unelected strongmen and popular consent, between nihilistic violence and human rights. This is a battle that has already been fought for many years and will be fought many years into the future. And it is not for Britain or any other Western power to try to resolve it. Only the many peoples of the world's Muslim countries can determine their future. Yes, we should stand up for human rights. Yes, we should support friendly states and moderate elements within other states. Yes, we should provide humanitarian support when wars are fought. But we have to disentangle our own national interest from the struggle that is going on in the Middle East and across the Muslim world. That judgment will sometimes be difficult to make. But in the case of ISIL, the danger is clear. They have already murdered British and American citizens in the most brutal and cowardly manner possible. They have attracted tens of thousands of foreign fighters, including thousands of Europeans, Americans, Australians, and British nationals. One of their terrorists has already struck in Europe when he murdered 4 innocent civilians outside the Jewish Museum in Brussels earlier this year. And they have made clear that they want to go on attacking Western targets. That is why it is right that we are part of the international coalition dedicated to ISIL's destruction. If ISIL succeeded in firmly consolidating their grip on the land they occupy in Syria and Iraq, we will see the world's first truly terrorist state established within a few hours flying time of our country. We will see terrorists given the space to plot attacks against us, train their men and women, and devise new methods to kill indiscriminately. We will see the risk, often prophesied, but thank God not yet fulfilled, that with the capability of a state behind them, the terrorists could acquire chemical, biological, or even nuclear weapons to attack us. This is not somebody else's battle. They have made clear their ambitions, and they have made us their enemies. And the lesson of history tells us that when our enemies say they want to attack us, they mean it. We must not flinch. We must not shy away from our responsibility. We must not drift towards danger and insecurity. While we still have the chance, we must act to destroy ISIL. The threat we face from ISIL is made even greater by the fact that there are at least 500 British nationals who have gone to Syria and Iraq, many of them to fight. Where they have dual nationality, I have the power to deprive them of their British citizenship and keep them out of our country. Thanks to our recent Immigration Act, in certain circumstances, I can do the same to naturalised British citizens and keep them out of the country too. But under international law, no country is allowed to make its citizens stateless, and most of those British fighters are likely to return to the UK in the end. So, like other countries faced with the same problem, and there are 700 from France, 400 from Germany, 300 from Belgium, and thousands in total from countries across Europe, we have to deal with the threat. The first thing we must do is discourage young British Muslims from travelling to Syria and Iraq in the first place. We know that some have travelled in order to do genuine humanitarian work. Others have gone in the hope of fighting against the government of Bashar al-Assad. But some have been drawn by the ideology of extremist militias like Al-Nusra Front and ISIL. We are working with families and community groups across the country to remind people how they can alleviate the suffering of civilians in Iraq and Syria without actually travelling there. Fighting for terrorist groups is never the answer. It is not acceptable and it is illegal. So we are working with other European countries.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is coherent news. What do you find when you listen to coherent news? Coherent meaning in past tense history. Coherent news as in, what can you learn from coherent news? Listen back through history. Listening back through past times. Past tense, what can you find? You can find a history repeating itself with Iraq, Iran, all the Islamic states and what's going on at the moment in the world. Obviously, we've got in Afghanistan at the moment. It's a bit further on in the eastern hemisphere. We've got the terrorist groups still happening amongst communities. You can't paint a picture. Is it Islamist or Muslim or whatever culture? My granddad was Pakistani, he's Muslim. But they're not all the same breed. Islamist extremists, people that don't follow or worship the word of God, absolutely. You can be whatever culture you come from, and if you're not following your culture properly, you're not a law-abiding citizen, quite frankly. So let's not become fascist or xenophobia against these different different segments of spiritual belief. It's not coming from a spiritual belief, it's becoming above and beyond that. They're taking a sinful step in the wrong direction, joining these ISIS or whatever other terrorist groups there is. Anyway, COVID, this is what I've been worried about. COVID coming into winter months. Is it going to be back to, the R number as we had last year? I mean, it's going to be rising. So, it's a big worry for all of us. COVID are cases about to plummet without plan B. We all knew that it's going to be a rise in COVID, rise in all kinds of infection, chest infection. We've got cold, flu, everything coming for the winter months. We all know what's going to happen. People are falling dramatically ill and trying to get in for the doctors with the current climate, where COVID's been about quite. It's been a big thing, and many jobs still hitting jobs in a disturbing manner, where people come out of work, people falling out of work, people falling out of place. People are trying to get doctor's appointments. It's hard to get a doctor's appointment. Luckily, I've got through today. I'm a high risk on many things, so I got through to my doctor today. They called me straight back. I was overwhelmed. You got to get it. You got to ring me by 8 o'clock with most doctors. Rising COVID cases have been putting both the NHS and ministers under huge pressure. But could this be about to change, and change quite dramatically? It is dangerous to read too much into a few days of data, especially given the way infection levels in the southwest of England have been skewed by the last test failings. But the recent rise that has caused so much concern does appear to have slowed and maybe is starting to drop in England. I mean, who do you ring if you can't get through to doctors, out of hours doctors? What's the number? You have to look on Google it and search on your phone. I would have it up and ready for you to announce that, but I haven't quite frankly got it in front of me. I could do the honours and find out for you. Maybe I will shortly. So you could get your pen and paper ready, or even your notes on your phone, writing that out of hours doctor's number down, or even look yourself, which I will do myself in a minute. I need to save it in my phone because I haven't got it. I could get a bit, especially come around this time of year. I suffer from a bad head. I've had a bad head for the last 5 days. Been in disparity with, I could have done with that extra bit of support. People ring me up to make sure I'm doing the right things, looking after my health. And despite all the talk about the need for the government to introduce Plan B, working from home, mandatory mask wearing and vaccine passports, there is actually a school of thought that we may be on the brink of seeing infection levels plummet. Modelling done for the government suggests case and deaths could soon start to fall dramatically. That tough is dependent on a number of factors, including the vast majority of over 50s coming forward for their boosters and the degree of cautious behaviour throughout winter when it comes to mixing and socialising. How England's COVID winter could plan out. This model, based on estimated total infections rather than those that come forward for testing and get reported in the daily data, comes from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, which is just one of the groups that feeds into the government. It is certainly the most optimistic at the moment, although what is noticeable is that the others produced by Imperial College London, University of Warwick, also point to some degree of decrease being the most realistic scenario. Why infection rates could drop. To understand why this may happen, you have to look at what has been driving the infection rates in recent weeks. During the summer, rising infections were being recorded largely in older teenagers, and then since school return, the high rates has been sustained by younger teenagers. In the most recent week, nearly half of those cases have been in the under 20s. Nearly half of the current cases among young coronavirus cases in England by age group, week ending 19th October. 0 to 19 years of age is 120,000 cases. 20 to 39 is 50,000. 49 to 59 is 70,000. 60 and older is 20. 60 and older is the lowest rise in COVID cases. The youth of today going through school, 120,000 people at school are more likely to bring back COVID than elders. This has happened with relatively little spillover into older age groups. Once the virus has been passed through these groups, who after all were the people least protected by the vaccine, there was always going to be a drop-off of infection levels across of the high levels of natural immunity required. That in turn produces a relatively small risk of infections being passed onto older groups, while the rollout of booster tops up their protection levels. All the modelling is quick to stress that it is still a huge amount of uncertainty over exactly when a sustained drop will happen and how far case numbers will fall. That is because infection levels are driven by two basic things: the type and amount of mixing with people, and the strength of immunity in the population. On both counts, there is much that is unknown. Experts still do not fully understand to what extent immunity from 2 doses of vaccination wanes, or how many people will come forward for boosters. And of course, predicting human behaviour and what happens to mixing patterns is very difficult. Professor John Edmonds, who leads the modelling group, the LSHTM, says there are all reasons why it is hard to precise about what will happen when. However, he certainly expects a hiatus to kick in at some point over the winter, pointing out that all models are suggesting this to some extent. He is, though, still worried about Christmas, which is a period when there is a lot of intergenerational mixing and a possible rebound in COVID in the spring. People taking safety precautions, I can't take my hat off to you. It's unfortunate people that do take risk and do not take risk and do get COVID and have their lives taken. You know, all we can do is, give our heart and condolences out to these people that are, taking everything significantly by law. Maybe it's your children or grandchildren not taking things. But they've got to go to school. They've got to have their livelihood. It's the unfortunate ones that end up getting COVID and dying to people being selfish. Adults even teachers or carers could be selfish, not taking restrictions lightly and take it into school and their kids getting it as well. That's exactly what could happen. As absolutely, I always say, carers could be the worst ones that are going out on the weekend and taking it into the care hospital or the care home. And then the elders are getting infection due to stupidity of carers. That's why they should have shut down the pubs before they shut down the schools and everything else. Because people drinking makes your immune system weaker. There is still an argument for Plan B. The modelling does, though, raise a question over whether Plan B is needed at this stage. Professor Mark Warhouse, an expert in infectious diseases at the University of Edinburgh, agrees that a drop over the winter is certainly possible. But he still believes the extra measures are worth taking as a precautionary step, reducing the risk of more drastic action being needed further down the line at the time, when other respiratory viruses, such as flu, will just add to the pressure on the NHS. He says the situation COVID so finely balanced as a small swing towards greater mixing or more warning than expected could make a big difference. It may also take little time for falls to start having an impact. The number of hospitalisations are such at a level currently that we really cannot tolerate much more of an increase, he adds. NHS staff should definitely have a bigger pay bracket. They're the only ones that have been working, and all legal authorities, the only ones that have been putting their own lives on the risk to stop others catching COVID. I feel sorry for the police. You get all these people that go on protests, not caring about anyone's life, but their own, being selfish. Especially the anti-vaxxers that go on protest. It's horrific to see. But he says the attention given to Plan B has masked some of the arguably more important issues. There are 5 million adults in the UK who have not had one dose, and we know unvaccinated people are far more likely to be hospitalised by COVID. I don't know why there is more attention given to this. On the top of this, there is in fact only half of the cases appear to be coming forward to get tested. Surveillance data from the Office of National Statistics suggests the true level of infection is twice what is being reported daily. We need to do better at finding cases and supporting people to self-isolate, he adds. Making progress on those, according to Professor Warhouse, is even more important than Plan B. We've done our evaluation, we've done our compare and contrast. It's important that we are thinking of this data outside the box. I'm talking to you guys, absolutely. We're going to look at a bit of criminology inside Essex, ladies and gents. Hope you're enjoying my cast on Proclamation News and Gatherence. Always working hard day in, day out. Look, using some of my skills for my academic integrity as well, most days. Richard Madeley gives Good Morning Britian viewers the ick during an interview with Sir Kier Starmer. Cannot bear to put the sound on Madeley makes my toenails curl. Richard Madeley has given some Good Morning Britain viewers the ick after interviewing with Sir Kier Starmer. We're going to listen to it in a minute. The Good Morning Britain presenter was questioning the Labour leader about Angela Rayner MP. Following reports, the deputy leader has been sidelined from a controversial Tory scum comment at a Labour Party conference reception last month. One thing I know about being, a spiritual belief or a political party follower, you cannot have hatred towards the other party. As I started off Proclamation News and Gatherence, I never had a great good to say about Labour Party, but as you see me progress through months and months on, I always talk about the other Labour Party things that they can't, provocation, there are things that they have struggles with, and I always seem to support them because I know there are other like-minded people such as myself that do support Labour Party, so I don't try and put them down as much as I used to. I'm conservative. I'm always, influential, and it's been going for generations upon generations. The government party, the first party found in the political spectrum. So, I've gone with the majority for a reason. My granddad was in World War II. I am a Johnson, and I was born in postmodernism in 1983. I've got Edwards in my family. As you know, Boris Johnson has got Edwards on his side of the family as well. Jonathan Edwards is part of his side of the family. I've got Jonathan Edwards in my family, and Jonathan Cooper actually, but we come from the same breed. He was a Grenadier Guard, just like my granddad was as well. Grenadier Guard, Queen's Guard. Sir Kier was on the show to talk about potential exclusion zones from people campaigning against vaccines and spreading lies and falsehoods outside schools. In a short clip, Mr. Madeley said it is true, as was reported in several Sunday newspapers yesterday from well-placed sources, that you are now sidelining Angela Rayner because of her comments about Tory scum. That you found those embarrassing and obviously in the light of terrible events. that happened 2 Fridays ago, incredibly poorly timed, and that you're keeping her out of sight and bring our people forward. It is true. Sir Kier Starmer said, no, that's not true. Every Sunday I get all the newspapers and faithfully go through them and read lots of things that are apparently happening, but bear no relation to the truth. But Mr. Healy landed in hot water with the viewers when he asked, so she's still your best girl, is she? Mr. Madeley asking if Angelina is still your best girl is giving me the ick. Sir Kier Starmer challenged over the reports that Angelina is being sidelined following her comments at a Labour Party conference last month. Many viewers expressed their disbelief about his comment on Twitter. Political activist Femi Oliwole said, she is still your best girl, really, Richard Madeley. Another said, Richard Madeley asking if Angelina is your best girl is giving me the ick. While third said, cannot bear to put the sound on. Madeley makes my toenails curl. And this is not the first time Richard has outraged viewers. The veteran presenter journalist from Montford was attacked online last week after attempting an accident while talking about Southend on city status. Colchester is going for city status, and we did say in previous shows that city status will be great for capitalism, bringing more infrastructure to the city centres, to bring more tourist attraction to our city centre for more economic impact on our shops in the town centres, town centres, which will be city. Absolutely, very important. Colchester is getting, always renovated for bigger and better hotels, establishments, restaurants, shopping centres, you name it, we claim it. We're getting bigger, better infrastructure, hospitals, more schools. It's going to be a city before long. It needs to be.
Bringing other people.
No,
is that true?
That's not true. Every Sunday I get all of the news.
Oh, Richard Madeley, come back.
And I faithfully go through them and read lots of things that are apparently happening that bear no relation to the truth.
So she's still your best girl, is she?
Well, look, what I would say in all certainty is that Angela Rayner's had a bereavement of a very, very close person to her, someone that she treated more or less as her mother. And so she's had a very bad and hard week.
Ladies and gents, I'm going to call that it on today's cast. It's Proclamation News and Gatherence. We've nearly had a full hour. I just want to say thank you ever so much for staying observed and both preserved. I do, I come in for an hour, talk for an hour. I put on the best performance I can give. I do try and emphasise my meditation. I do have characteristics, I believe. I'm so thankful. I keep it professional. I'm a bit of a serious person, some might say. I don't always stop to chat, but you do have a welcoming chat at the end of the show to give me some feedback. If anything, you have any provocations in your own constituency, maybe your potholes need repair. As a councillor, I can point you in the right direction how to go about getting your roads fixed. It does take 28 days for them to assess the damage and look at all the other works they've got in front of them, ahead of them for future months ahead, but it will be outlined, and I'm pretty sure in maybe months, could be a year, till they tackle the climate, weather, climate, and everything else. They might get fixed. Potholes and things like that, it costs money for the council. So even rubbish, if you live in a suburban area, there's lots of rubbish that needs clearing. There are protocols we can go down and ways to go about getting them done. So please call in and address your problems, address your provocation, you can address your sociological society, maybe brought up in urban areas, lots of wastage, lots of alcoholism, lots of narcotics, lots of things that could be affecting your children, to get that progression to some form of reality as such as ourselves, us listeners. Thank you all so much for paying attention. Thank you so much for joining in. Please subscribe to Proclamation News and Gatherence. It is the prodigious, the prominent Professor Johnson. Thank you ever so much. Supporting the NHS, the police, absolutely. I'm supporting the police because not, you know, there's good and bad in everyone, but they join the police force, become good in the first place, and then, you know, if they do make a mistake in their job, and it is quite significant, always remember when they started, they had good intentions, and they are doing the best they can to support us. Same as the fire brigade as well. Everyone makes mistakes in life, and sometimes you have to take a step back, have a breather, and get back to work at a later date. But some policemen, unfortunately, do take things a step too far, as we've seen in media. But it's media. How do you read the media? You know, it depends who's writing the media, can not justify reality, what actually happened. Anyway, I just want to say thank you. God bless. Take care. One love, and speak soon. Just logging out of my YouTube channel before I say my last goodbyes to everyone on Castbox. Oh my goodness.